Hi, everybody. This is going to be CRE number 5. We're doing prompt number 2, talking about the death penalty today. For this assignment, we've been tasked with pretending that we have been wrongfully convicted um, and set to be executed, and kind of giving people an idea of how our experience is on death row and how we feel about the death penalty in general. And I just want to start by saying that I am adamantly against the death penalty. I feel that it doesn't really add any value to our society. And I feel that if we put an individual to death for something such as murder, any heinous crime that we deem is worthy of the death penalty, that we are no better as a society than the individual that committed that crime to begin with. There's a lot that definitely goes into the death penalty as a whole, and I kind of want to jump into some of those things um, in this hypothetical situation. The first one is inequities in our criminal justice system and how they may have impacted me in this specific scenario. As we learned in lecture, um, death row inmates are primarily men. The vast majority of them are men. We know that about half of them, despite black men being a significantly smaller portion of the overall population, about half of death row um, inmates are black men as well. So while it may not have impacted me by my race, my gender definitely would have played a significant role in my sentencing. Um, Another thing that we want to talk about is how this may affect my family and the life that I wanted to live. This is definitely something that's going to have a huge strain on my family, both emotionally and financially, especially if they back me up and they believe that I'm innocent and are doing everything that they can to help me get exonerated. This is going to take a toll on them, but it's also going to take a massive toll on me, as we learned in lecture as well. The average death row inmate in Texas, from the time the process of trial begins to the day that they're executed or exonerated, they typically spend about 38 years on average on death row, which is just an obscene amount of time. This is years and years and years of a person's life taken away by death row. As we learned from David Doe in the TED talk that he had, this process is long and drawn out, from the beginning process where you go to trial. There's state appeals, there's federal appeals before you can finally get to the execution. And it's just a very long, drawn out process. It's a strain on the resources of not only the person on death row, but on taxpayers, citizens, and our government as well. It's very expensive, the amount of litigation that we have to go through to be able to actually execute somebody. And at the end of the day, I personally don't feel that this benefits us really in any way. Another aspect of this is there any way that you can interpret this wrongful execution, if I were to be wrongfully executed, as a good death? And I really don't feel, based on the definition of a good death that we were given in our lecture, that a wrongful execution could be ever viewed as that. I feel that we know that a good death really requires you some level of comfort, the ability to be around the people that you love, some preparedness for your death. And I really feel like this execution, it changes all that. It takes all of those things away from you. You have no choice in how this is done. It's not always a painless death. Our course media, we've talked about the drugs that are used to partake in lethal injection. Not only are they very hard to obtain, John Oliver's last week tonight episode about the death penalty really dove into that, how secretive um, governments are about trying to obtain these drugs and how difficult it can be to get them. And NPR also did this as well, getting them through channels that aren't necessarily legal and vetted by the FDA to try to acquire these drugs for lethal injection. So it's not always a painful death. The people that are providing the service are typically not well trained. They're not doctors. Doctors are not able to. We were learned this in lecture as well. They take the Hippocratic Oath. They say they will do no harm, so that prevents them from being able to administer the death penalty to anybody. So I don't feel that this could be a good death. I feel like it's in almost every scenario, a bad death. And then finally, one thing that I want people to know that might be able to change the situation is that wrongful executions are avoidable. If we don't have the death penalty, no innocent person can ever be put to death. In our most recent lecture, Dr. Hernandez talked to us about something called the Innocence Project. It's a group of people. They strive to help people who are put to death row be exonerated. And they've helped 191 people be exonerated from death row in their time that they've been working. The fact that that many people have been found innocent, that's a staggering number, that we've attempted to put 191 people to death, and the fact that they found that many and actually been able to help them means that there are almost certainly more people who have been put to death when they were wrongfully accused. So I really feel like people should know that if we were able to remove the death penalty as something that we see as a viable option for punishment, then we have no chance of putting these innocent people to death. We're saving lives that don't have any reason to be lost. As for my interviews, I interviewed my mother and I interviewed my friend Cole. Um, Both of them were mostly against the death penalty. Cole really seemed to focus on the mental aspects of the death penalty on the person being executed, as that's a huge challenge. If you're aware that you're going to be put to death, you know you're innocent. That's obviously a massive mental toll that's going to take on your brain, and that's something that he really highlighted is what he wanted people to think about. My mother was a lot more along my lines, just not being for the death penalty in general, really referring to the fact that it doesn't really benefit us in any way, and that it doesn't. We as a society don't really gain anything from it. She kind of referred to it as honestly being easier on somebody who actually is convicted, hey, actually committed this crime, than life in prison, because not it kind of gives them a way out rather than having to live in prison with zero freedom, and live with what they've done. So that's all I've got. I appreciate you for taking the time to hear me out.